I never would have believed it if I hadn't seen it myself. It was my own eyes that confirmed the reality of this situation. Yet even now, after everything, there are still things that I cannot explain. How could there be? It all happened after I moved into the apartment building. My name is Melanie Carter. I am a school teacher, 28 years old. I moved to Chicago, Illinois from Arizona for a new job at a prestigious academy in the northern part of the city. I found a one-bedroom apartment in a large building downtown. It was a good deal, and the apartment itself was nice, spacious, lots of light. The only problem was the building seemed kind of old and run down, but that wasn't the worst thing. The manager showed me around the apartment complex, which seemed pretty standard until we got to the third floor. That's when he said the most bizarre thing. We were walking down the hallway. There were 5 apartments on each side. The apartment numbers alternated between 301 and 313. On the right side, the manager stopped in front of the door marked 313. That unit's off limits, he said, pointing to the door. No tenants, not for rent, nothing. Don't go near that blue door, okay? Why? I asked him. Why is it off limits? He looked over his shoulder. Just don't ask questions. It's a rule, okay? You don't go by there. If you see anybody coming out of that door, you ignore them. You pretend they're not there. Do you understand? Sure, I said. Is there a problem with that apartment? Not that you need to know about? Just don't go near the door, okay? And he insisted on showing me the other vacant units. They were all identical except for the blue door, which remained closed. So I finally got to move in, and everything seemed normal for the first few days. Then I started to notice little things. For example, whenever I saw another tenant in the hallway, they would suddenly stop and stare at me. Then they would quickly look away, as if embarrassed, and rush in the opposite direction. At first, I thought maybe they just didn't want to talk to a new neighbor. But then they wouldn't even meet my eyes. They would turn away and walk the other way without saying a word. One evening, I was home alone, and I heard a scratching noise coming from inside the wall, near the blue door. I couldn't quite make out what it was. It sounded like somebody dragging their fingernails across wood paneling. I told myself it was probably just some animal or something. But I couldn't help wondering if it had anything to do with the weird behavior I'd been seeing from the other tenants. At night, my cat would refuse to go near the blue door. She would hiss and arch her back and not let herself be coaxed any closer. Even when I tried to pet her, she would bite and scratch and run and hide under the bed. It was strange because normally she's very affectionate and she loves being petted. But the one thing she hated more than anything else was the sound of the blue door closing at night. Every night, just after 3:13 a.m., I would hear scratching sounds and what sounded like crying. Sometimes I would hear the faint echo of a child's voice whispering my name. After hearing those noises, the tenants in the other apartments seemed to vanish. Nobody ever came out of their rooms during the day. Whenever I went outside, I would see groups of people standing around talking, but they would always fall silent and look away whenever I approached. It was like they didn't want me to see them or speak to them. I tried asking some of the tenants about the blue door, but they refused to answer my questions. They would mumble something about not knowing what I was talking about, and then they would walk away. But I noticed that whenever a tenant came out of their apartment, they would take a detour around the blue door. They never walked too close to it. One day I decided to confront the manager. I stopped him in the hallway and asked him directly about the noises and the tenants that were apparently living in the third-floor hallway. I also asked him about the door that had no apartment number. He gave me a strange look and seemed to hesitate before answering. "There are no tenants living in that apartment," he finally said. "Nobody ever has. Then why do the people in the other apartments seem to avoid it at all costs?" "Listen," he said, getting agitated. "It's a rule. Okay, don't go near that door. Don't try to find out what's behind it. You're not allowed to open it. But why not?" He shook his head. "I told you not to ask questions. Now drop it. Okay, forget that you ever saw that door. Just don't ask questions." And then he hurried away before I could press him further. Now I couldn't get the blue door out of my mind. All of the weird stuff that had been happening since I moved in didn't make sense unless the blue door had something to do with it. I couldn't sleep at night. I kept hearing the scratching sound, but I could never see anything behind it. So finally one night I got up and went to investigate. I stood in front of the blue door, listening intently. There were heavy footsteps above me, and the scratching grew louder. I reached out and pressed my ear against the solid wood. Footsteps stopped. Then I heard a voice behind the door, whispered, "Help me. I've been here so long, and nobody listens to me anymore." When I pulled back, my hand left a print in the cold wood. I stared at it for a moment. Then I turned the knob and pushed the door open. The doorknob fell out of my hand and landed on the floor with a metallic clang. I gasped and quickly shut the door, but it was too late. The hinges screamed in protest and the door wouldn't close. I knew I had to break the lock. Taking a deep breath, I threw my shoulder into it, but it didn't budge. Guilt washed over me. I couldn't bring myself to destroy the door, but the desperate voice I'd heard compelled me to keep trying. Finally, the wood splintered and the door swung inward. On the other side was a narrow stone staircase spiraling downward into darkness. It was impossible. I was on the 3rd floor. I felt a cold breeze on my skin and smelled the musty odor of damp earth. Somehow I knew that if I descended the stairs, it would lead me out of the building. I hesitated for only a second before stepping onto the first stair. Immediately, I regretted it. Each step was colder than the last, and the air grew thinner. As I continued down, I realized it wasn't just the temperature dropping, but the entire environment was changing. At first, it was only subtle. The poster on the wall was dated November 1969. A newspaper on the floor was from December 1974. I recognized the headline. Watergate burglar resigns in disgrace. A record album on a shelf was from January 1978. I felt like I was moving through time backwards. Then, as I climbed lower, the differences became more obvious. Wallpaper patterns changed. Light fixtures were replaced by newer models. The carpeting changed from wall to wall, room to room. When I finally made it to the bottom, I found myself in a large mirrored room. I gasped and stumbled back. In the glass, I saw a tall, slender figure wearing clothes from the 1970s. I blinked in surprise. The woman in the reflection blinked back. I took another step back, still staring at the reflection. Then I realized it was myself, but not me now. It was me as I was 50 years ago. I wanted to touch the glass, to reach out and grab myself, but something held me back. Before I could think about it, my reflection raised a hand to touch the mirror. Then she stepped back and vanished. I spun around and looked for a way out. The staircase was gone, and so was the blue door. I was trapped, and the wall beside me shimmered, and the blue door reappeared. On the other side, I saw the landlord from earlier. He was giving a tour to a new tenant. As he talked, he gestured past the blue door and said, "You'll hear noises sometimes. Just don't open that door. You'll hear voices, crying sometimes. Just don't answer. Just don't open the blue door." I stared at him in disbelief. Then he turned his head and glanced in my direction. His eyes met mine and he smiled. Then he looked away again and continued talking. From inside the door, I heard a faint whisper. "Don't let them open it again."